Today we have Olaf with us, and if I introduce you with Olaf again, Olaf has 30 years of experience in the technical industry, and during this area, he remained development team lead, practical daily developer. Currently, he's code coach, and he helps you become master software engineer, and he has a great experience in the industry. And today I invited him again to join me on my session on the importance of clean architecture. So I'm so glad that I have Olaf with us today. And first of all, I would welcome you, Olaf. Thank you so much for your precious time. You came to join me on the podcast session and help community and share your knowledge, and to be everyone to be a better person. If you share your knowledge, every one of us be a better programmer, be a better architecture. So welcome you, Olaf, and thank you for joining me.
Hi, Maria. Thank you very much for having me. I am honored to be again on your podcast.
Thank you very much, Olaf. And today's topic is very much very much important in today's era. So most of the people are just aware of the definition of this clean architecture. So you have experience of 30 years in the industry, and I've been working in the industry from past 11 years. So we are the one who have practically done and implemented these architectures. So it's our ethical and moral responsibility to share our knowledge into the community, especially those who are just in the beginning of their career, who have just started their career, who are in the mid level of their career, to help them better understand this clean architecture. So for all the developers, the goal of a good software architecture, is at the end to minimize the human resources that were required to build and maintain the required system. So the quality of the design is very important. Like the measure of design quality is simply the measure of the effort required to meet the needs of the customer. So if the effort is low in whatever you have developed and stays low throughout the lifetime of the system, then your system design is good. And if that effort grows and grows and grows with each new release, then it means your design is bad. It's as simple as that. And today Olaf will be throwing some light on this clean architecture. So I'll be asking you, Olaf, why do you like this clean architecture?
Well, Maria, I'd just like to say that your definition of a good architecture or a useful architecture was beautiful. This idea that it's easy to change and cheaply to change throughout its entire lifetime, which could be from years through decades. When we don't have an architecture, then it becomes harder and harder, and jobs that should take days or maybe weeks take weeks and months and sometimes even years or can't even be done because it's now legacy code and a big ball of mud. Everything's stuck together. What To answer your question, what do I like about clean architecture? Clean architecture outlines to us a schematic of how we should structure our software at the highest level so that we achieve that goal that you have just mentioned, that we can cheaply replace and easily replace entire subsystems. If you no longer like a particular framework, you haven't coupled yourself to it, you can remove it. The framework's been kept at arm's length. And that goes for a database as well. If you no longer find SQL Server is serving you well and now you want to move to Azure Table Storage, okay, cool. You can do that, with relatively easily. If you haven't followed clean architecture or hexagonal architecture or onion architecture, and your SQL Server data access is baked right into your business logic and UI, it's going to become much, much harder.
Exactly. The idea is that if you like, for example, if you today you are working with the SQL databases or Oracle databases, So in the future, you think that your customers are growing, might be you need to change the backend database. So you are not tightly coupled to redesign your application. You are free to change your application. That's basically flexible. That's one reason of choosing the architecture. That's basically the flexible. So Olaf, how much do you agree with this that application architecture should be a screaming one? Like when someone was your code, just folder structure, that should be a screaming. Like the application would be telling you what is this about. How do you think about it?
I like the idea of the, your solution in .NET being designed in such a way that you've got folders that talk about what your system, what kind of customer problems it solves. Okay. I think, for example, if you're working in an accounting system, it shouldn't be talking about MVC, or at least the artifacts you should be seeing shouldn't be about MVC or class library or console app as much as it's about books and lending and late fees and returns and the purchasing in of new books, whatever kind of goes into a library. When you look at a .NET solution like that, if we're talking about .NET, for example, then you should be seeing folders that talk about that. I mean, they're really, at the end of the day, there will still be the console apps, the class libraries, and that kind of artifact, but it should be more in the background. Normally, we don't do that so much. It's all about MVC, console app, class libraries, and screaming architectures of screaming what the system is really all about.
Exactly. So Olaf, do you think that if you have the customer and he pressurizes you to just build the frequent releases of the software, and the developers who are so overconfident that okay, no, go like follow this the bad architecture, the messy architecture, and we can the developers are not following the clean architecture, or they think that we can fix this later, and they just want to be champion and the fast forwarding in the market, and they're not going clean. Do you believe that if you're not going to the clean and you're stick to your messy architecture just to go fast, will isn't it related to the low productivity in the future?
That's an excellent question, Maria. So I see this often enough when I work with clients where there is some thinking that we can go faster when you and this is actually true. You can go faster initially. It's actually amazing how productive you can be, on the first few days and weeks and possibly even months when you um, don't have a legacy system yet, when it isn't messy and when you haven't sort of implemented a clean architecture or an onion architecture or, screaming architecture yet. Okay. Back then, it doesn't matter. In fact, you might even be faster. But what then tends to come is there's sort of an inversion of the curve. You might have been faster initially, but because you haven't put a structure, the right structure or architecture in place, you're actually now starting to, starts to take longer or product. But the time to put a new feature in place takes longer, or another way of saying that is that developer productivity is taking a bit of a dive. It's kind of coming down. Things take longer and longer. It's like walking through mud. It's much harder, but you want to walk on the road. So I recommend that you think about architecture to start with. Also techniques like test-driven development, all right, unit testing, that kind of thing, but it isn't always taken on board.
So when the developers say that we can go back and clean up this thing later, we have to get to market first, and we have to build this feature first. Of course, things can never get cleaned later. If you think that you will build the messy architecture and you are gonna get this clean later, then it never happens. Getting to when you get into the market first simply means that you have now already are in the competition. So you can't you are in the competition of running as fast as possible. So you cannot simply go back and clean things because you are in the race of building the next feature and the next feature and the next feature. So this builds the mess. So if you're not going clean in the start, then eventually your productivity is gonna be affected in the later stages, and then adding more people to build that feature fast won't help. Only thing you can do is to go clean, at the start. And then that might be facing some difficulties, like we say that if we are developing software, we are writing the quality code, we are implementing the test driven development, then you will be more confident on your code rather than you are in race of the frequent releases and not in going the idea of getting against the clean architecture.
I agree. It's way too easy to say we clean it up later on. And it actually is possible, all right, to do that, but it takes many times the effort of
Exactly.
having it done at the start. So in that way, it is a little bit like technical debt. Debt has got an interest rate with it and it gets bigger over time. It's the same with that. And a way of explaining it that I have found successful, by the way, if I may just talk about this for a minute, is to kind of say to the product owner or to the engineering manager, whoever is in charge of the budget. Well, if we do this right now, it costs $5,000. If we do this in 6 months' time, it's going to cost 20,000. It's like, oh wow, that's like a lot more. And I say, yeah, because it's now
Exactly.
a mess, now it's a problem. Right now it's
Exactly.
easy and we can fix it cheaply.
Exactly. Exactly. So, Olaf, I see that many developers are much confused between clean architecture, onion, or hexagonal architecture. So, how do you think these are all common, or how these architectures are similar?
So the all these architectural flavors at the end of the day have got the same idea at their core, which is that
Exactly.
the business logic, the what the software does. Okay, not the
Exactly.
technologies, not that it's a SQL Server database and we're using web or an API or whatever it might be. That the business logic is separated from the data access and also from the web or console app or whatever it might be. Okay, so
Exactly.
that part is the same for ports and adapters, which is hexagonal architecture. Okay, it's the same for clean architecture. That's also the idea behind screaming architecture at the end of the day,
Exactly.
and onion architecture as well.
Exactly. Exactly. I totally agree with you, Olaf. So, what do you think? What are the core components of a clean architecture? Like, what are the core components that should be there when someone is just starting to work on the clean architecture? What are the main layers, if you could just mention that?
Okay, I'll talk about the main layers and maybe as a sort of because I see there's a couple of questions there. Another one on how do you even start with clean
Exactly.
architecture, if you don't mind. So the there is like a core to the clean architecture, which is the business logic, and that's split up into two parts. One of them is the entities. All right, and what are the
Exactly.
entities? Entities are enterprise-wide business rules. It's like, okay, Olaf, what do you mean? Enterprise-wide business rules are, like, for example, that a customer number has 9 digits and has always got 9 digits. That would be a rule that applies for all customers, and that would be that live in an entity. Next come the use cases. So the next layer out, use cases are business logic workflows. They're basically the things that the application does. They're they're um, things that you can do with the application. So, for example, you can create a customer, you can edit a customer, you can create an order for the customer, you can edit
Exactly.
the delivery address. If you've got 100 things like that you can do with the application, then you'd have 100 use cases. Okay,
Exactly.
so those are application kind of you know business logic workflows, and then you've got like a thin layer called that I like to call the business logic interface. Okay, this is basically
Exactly.
the doors out to the mechanisms, the doors out to, all right, we want to use a SQL Server database, or no, we want to use a MongoDB database, or we want to go web, or that kind of thing. So the next layer, then you've got, well, actually, let me jump to the outermost layer. The outermost layer are basically technologies. All right, SQL Server database and Entity Framework, or SQL Server
Exactly.
database and ADO.NET. And then you've got obviously something in the middle that makes sure that from the business logic, we can connect to SQL Server, so we
Exactly.
can connect to the entity framework core. So there was like a little layer that kind of says, well, the request gets converted so it can talk to the entity framework core and then out. And then when a response kind of comes back, with data from the database, entity framework core kind of gets then converted into a POCO, a plain old, object that lives on the business logic side of things. All right, this is how you do pure um, clean
I think that's
architecture.
the perfect explanation. There's a perfect explanation. You have
Thank you.
saved so much time of the readers who were just about to go and read so much articles and reading books. You have summarized this information in so simple words. That's
Thank you.
great explanation. That's great explanation.
So, if I just okay, is it okay if I talk for a minute about how you should start with clean architecture? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So with clean architecture, you want to start, and this seems a little bit funny. You don't want to start with the database. It's like, well, how do I work out where to get the data from? You don't worry about it. You actually program up what what is the business meant to do. And a good way that I like to think of it is I actually compare
Exactly.
it to a paper process that happened 100 years ago. That's a business. Say, for example, registering a customer. Okay. Well, how do we do that? What is business logic when you register a customer? Well, what if we compare it to a customer comes into a shop, all right, 100 years ago. Customer comes into a shop, okay, and says, "I want to be, I want to be a customer. I want to register." Okay, so you get a paper form, you fill that out, name, first name, last name, email address. Well, there wouldn't have been an email address, but you put email address in. You give that form to the the the, the the shop owner. They check everything is there. That's the validation. Okay. Then they check whether or not you already exist in the database. So they go to a filing cabinet or their book to check whether or not you're already there. Okay. If you're there, they say, hey, you already exist a customer. So that validation now failed. You kind of go back. Becomes the 400 bad request. The customer already exists. If
Exactly.
not, they put a customer number on and they put it into the filing cabinet. Okay. It's like, well, how can that be? Well, you program up that stuff. First, we validate, then we convert the model to a customer, giving it a customer number. Then we save it to a repository. Okay. It's like, oh, wow. That's what we do. It has nothing to do with SQL Server or MongoDB. You go against a repository interface.
That's perfect. Exactly. That's perfect. That's
Um,
perfect. That idea. What is business need to do? I really like this line. What the businesses need to do,
yes.
irrelevant of Mongo, SQL, Oracle, Postgres. What the business is meant to do. Yes, exactly. I really like this.
and everything else becomes a pluggable. That SQL becomes a pluggable, Postgres becomes a pluggable. It's just, and the business doesn't know about that. That, by the way, that's another part of clean architecture, is that the arrows of dependency are moving inwards. So that's why it's a good idea to start with the business logic first, and you just
There,
program that part.
there couldn't be more perfect definition than this.
Thank you.
So, Olaf, do you believe that if someone is starting with the clean architecture, do you believe that how does this clean architecture is going to facilitate this testability? If you we talk about testing or application, so how does this clean architecture facilitates the testability? We say that it promotes the separation of concern, but how does this clean architecture will facilitate the testability if you see it from the testing side? If you throw some light on this as
I'm
well.
actually glad you asked that question, because I had so far totally, ignored that part. So the beautiful thing is, and this is why we start with the business logic core, we are not coupled to SQL Server, Postgres, MongoDB, because those are technologies that are become plugins. So what does that mean? We've just got interfaces, and it means it's perfectly testable. When we write a unit test, okay, that we want to look up a customer by email address, right, as part of this registering a customer workflow, we can kind of say, well, either in the unit test, we can have one unit test that kind of says, well, actually, the customer already exists, which then becomes an error. Ah, easy. We do that through a stub. Or the customer doesn't exist, and we also do it through the same stub, but just it returns different data. Doesn't exist, and we can kind of carry on. It's like, wow, testability, because we're not coupled to the technologies, is really easy. And by the way, for .NET, that means that your business logic project, because it isn't
Exactly.
coupled to technologies, it should have no dependencies on SQL Server, on Postgres, nothing like that. It is very independent.
Exactly. Exactly. Couldn't agree more. Exactly.
Thank you.
So, Olaf, do you believe that, and can this clean architecture improve the code maintainability? How, throw some light on this? How this clean architecture enhances the code maintainability? We say that the software which is built in 1 year, 2 year, 3 year is only successful if this is maintainable with only less effort. Your changes in one part are not affecting the entire application. So how, throw some light on this, how this clean architecture enhances this code maintainability?
Right, to answer your question, let me go the other way first and say, okay, let's say we don't have clean architecture. Say we started with the database, okay, and then we built like the business logic on top of it, okay, using the entities that come out of the database. So maybe even like data sets and data rows. It's all, and then we put that bubbles all the way up into the UI. So now every time you make a change in the database, maybe, or to Entity Framework Core, it bubbles up into the business logic. You might have to make changes there, and then it bubbles up into the UI, and you might have to make changes there. And it's like, oh my goodness, now I have to make changes in 3 separate layers. With clean
Exactly.
architecture, you don't have that. You basically cut it because you're saying, hey, this middle part is independent of everything else. The data access part and database part doesn't get to the UI, and the UI doesn't get to the data access, so they can't affect one another. That is going to be a huge help. If you're making changes in the database, doesn't even hit the business logic. Okay, the only thing it hits is your adapter to the database. Now, I hope that makes sense.
Exactly, exactly. And then in turn supports the code reusability as well, because the modules are independent with each other, so they're already loosely coupled, and it's already your beautiful modular design, so it just promotes the code reusability as well. So,
Definitely.
Olaf, one last question: do you believe there are any disadvantages to use clean architecture?
There are disadvantages for, if you wouldn't want to use clean architecture for really small projects, if you're like writing a script or a throwaway prototype where you are just doing it dirty, and the idea is that you're actually throwing it away. If later on you're kind of coming back and saying, well, actually, this is now the basis for our application, and it becomes our application, well, that's more problematic. Clean
Yes.
architecture has got a learning curve to it, so that is a disadvantage. You need to get your head around working a bit differently, all right?
Exactly.
And of
Exactly.
course, it takes a bit longer at the start, but then later on, months or years in, you're going to be so happy you did clean architecture.
Exactly. Initially, you have to invest time in understanding and implementing this clean architecture correctly. But the results, are going to be magical. But in start, this could be challenging for the developers to invest time in understanding and implementing the correct version of clean architecture.
Yes. I mean, I would even kind of say, look, if you're not comfortable with clean architecture, why not bring it a level back? Just write clean classes, okay? And if you're not
Exactly.
comfortable with that and you're just sort of starting out, write clean methods, write clean code, write small methods, make sure you've got a limited number of parameters. Just start out at a level where you're comfortable and make an effort to try and improve there. And when you're sort of a junior or intermediate developer, it's really hard to sort of say, hey, I don't understand a lot of this. But you can sort of say, hey, a 300 line function isn't good. Let's make it shorter. Let's make it 50. Let's make it 20 lines. Let's maybe even make it 10 lines. Can I do stuff like that? It's like, yeah, that's a
Exactly.
really, if you're not comfortable with clean architecture per se, then let's bring it back a level and try and succeed there.
Olaf, did you ever encountered a chance where your customer forced you to use clean architecture? The customer actually wanted you to.
No, I have not come across a situation where my customer forced me to use clean architecture. Uh, the customers tended to be, more sort of product people, right? And the clean architecture part is, something within engineering, falls within the engineering domain, the engineering realm. How we implement things to make our lives easier as well as ultimately the product people's lives. But no, I have not been forced to do it. This is something that, this is how I like to work, and that's why I like to use it. Um,
Exactly. But I have worked with a client that's requirement was to use only the clean architecture.
I would
So,
love that. I want that client like that.
believe me, I worked with the client on his place, on his territory, and he used to come and visit the core and actually see is this clean and verifying are they going clean or not? Are they implementing solid or not? So I'm working currently with this client who is very much interested in following only the clean architecture. So he
Wow.
basically understands he understands this architecture and he has worked with so many different softwares. So he actually wanted us to go clean. So uh, I really liked it that he just visits us and visits the application structure folder, because at the end his goal is to produce a maintainable software. That's what he demanded. Not only he wants rich features, but also he wants that when the team leaves the project is maintainable. That's what his vision is.
That is fantastic. And I think this is, this is the difference between a client like that and your usual client who doesn't have that much of an idea around how to do good engineering, to do proper engineering. You have an enlightened client who knows what they want and what will help them in the long term, not just right here, right now.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. So it could be challenging sometimes when things are, but it really does the it's really helpful if the client is understanding things. And So at the end, we want a product that is, really helpful for the end users. You know,
Yes.
and also when you leave the code, no one, comes and checks to your your code, and just he feels bad on who wrote this code, and this is very bad with the company you're working for. So this is really bad for the people you're working for. So you have to be very much cautious in any line of code you write, or any architecture, anything you are doing. It must be clean. If it's not about good programmer being a good programmer, as Uncle Bob says, you have to be a good writer as well.
That's actually a really good point. You do have to be a good writer, don't you? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And your
So
code
Olaf,
should read like English. Yeah. So yeah.
sorry, I couldn't get what what did you say then?
I was saying that to write clean code, your code should read like natural language. The variable
Exactly.
names are the
Exactly.
best possible variable names, are meaningful. The functions have meaningful
Exactly.
names.
Exactly.
They're short. It almost reads like English.
You don't have to write the dirty code. Like if you're creating even object of the class, you make it meaningful. Like what is this about? Not A1, not B1, not C1. Just be it meaningful. And also not make your code with so many unused, not useful comments or extra code and commented code that's no one ever going to use. So be clean. That's my advice to our connections, that please write a clean code. Before jumping to clean architecture, first be a good writer, a good coder, a clean coder.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
Yes, and I really, Olaf, I really enjoyed this session. And even though I have implemented this clean architecture many times, but still I got so much things to learn from you. So many rich definitions, so many things that you made really easy. Understanding from the books or articles was a challenging one, but your definitions are really so simple and very nice. I really enjoyed this session, and I hope that the people for whom we are recording really get benefit from this session, and I hope they will do. And
Good.
I'm really thankful. I'm really thankful for you to give your time. I know you have been very busy. Even I was really busy with the work, but we are I invited you and you joined the session and you give us your time, and it's really gonna help the community. And at the end, the purpose of our life is just to spread positivity in the community. Just in any way we can spread this positivity and share the knowledge, because anything you like to add in this, I'm really thankful for you for this session. I had this notes, and whatever you were saying, I captured this in the notes, and it's really helpful.
Good. Thank you very much. There's actually one more thing that might actually be the most help of all. I have got a GitHub account, and on GitHub, I have got a clean architecture.net solution with projects, which is implementing, like, for a thin slice, like the register a customer slice, it's implementing clean architecture. So business logic project is standing by itself, and then you've got technology projects. So if you're, I can send you later on in messaging. I send you the URL. You can maybe put it into the notes or display it on the screen when you editing it up, so that people can, if they say, hey, I've got no idea, bang, now you do. Here is an example of how you do
Oh,
it.
that would be really great. That would be really helpful. And maintaining your GitHub account is really necessary, Olaf, I believe. you know sh- and not everyone likes to share their code, but it's really helpful for the people who understood the cleans, pros and cons, and now they actually want to start, and it's really helpful and handy for them to follow your GitHub account, and you follow your code, your style, and it would be really helpful for the new guys who are just starting, or even the people who are already implementing it. If they, it's really helpful for them to implementing it right. So please share your Git that address, and I'll be attaching this to the video description, so everyone may get benefit from your GitHub repository and your clean architecture code samples.
Excellent. Good.
So Olaf, and I don't actually the last question is not related to clean architecture, but please throw some light on importance of agile environment on the workplace for the developers, for the leads, for POs, for the client, for the customer, everyone. Why following agile is important for us?
Another great question. I mean, agile is important because it's meant to deliver rapid customer value. All right. And really, at the end of the day, that's kind of what it boils down to. And a lot of sort of mistakes in agile that I have seen is that companies, say, oh, yes, we do agile, but we do agile, but not test-driven development, or agile, but not pair programming, or agile, but not some other part. They tend to like um, the project management parts to it. We're doing Scrum, we're doing Kanban, and all that kind of stuff, and we're doing the ceremonies, we do stand-ups and all of that. That's all great, but how often is the customer actually involved in designing the
Exactly.
program? How often are they
Exactly.
presented with, hey, this is what we did in the last sprint? Probably not as much as they should be. Yeah, the product owner is there and that's great, but the customer themselves are not that
Exactly.
involved in it. Also,
Exactly.
it is really important to do the technical aspects as well. It's important that the software works all the time. And by writing unit tests first, that helps. Or even if you don't do it first, just write unit tests. Do a bit more pair programming. It spreads the knowledge in the team and it also produces fewer bugs. It's great in that way. I mean, I when I sit with a junior programmer, a junior developer, I'm I still tend to learn from them. Not maybe so much about programming itself, how to write good
Exactly.
code, but I'll learn from them about how to use Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. Oh, I've got a new shortcut. I didn't know, or here's the
Exactly.
latest thing in .NET, you know. So
I
yeah,
totally
it's
agree. Exactly. So when you're basically when your customer is involved in your design process, so he's aware of the complete design. So in future, there are minimal chances of bugs and minimal chances of redesigning the actual feature you build. So it's really important for us to follow this process. We say that we follow the process, but we actually don't follow this process at all, because
yes.
we are in the long run to go fast and fast and fast.
We go fast and fast and fast building the wrong thing.
Building the wrong thing, then coming back and fixing it and losing our money.
Yes. And then it's much slower, you're like, hold on, couldn't we have done
My
this
God.
differently? Oh, yes.
All right, Olaf, thank you so much for your session. I really had a great time and I'm really looking for more sessions with you. And really enjoyed this session. This was really helpful. Thank you
Okay,
very much.
I'm so glad. Thank you very much for having me on. I actually really enjoyed the session as well. It's good to explain to your followers and listeners, viewers, about all these different kind of concepts it took me a long time to accumulate, like maybe the last 15 years,
Exactly.
but it doesn't need to take that long for you or for them, but
Exactly.
it is, of course, important to be exposed to these different ideas again and again before the light bulb goes on and it's like, oh, now I get it.
All right. Thank you, Olaf. I'm just stopping this recording and thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Bye bye.
Have a great day.